All right. We're almost done with part 3 of The Way of Kings. A few more chapters left, but for this week's read along, we had some great action-packed chapters here. And with me to discuss them, as always, is Tom. What's going on, buddy?
Hello. Welcome to our new world, our new reality.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Some definitely some trying times here, man. I'm sure people's work life schedules have been upended a little bit, or across the country, and we have people, as of our last series with his Dark Materials, people even outside of our local area, as far as the United Kingdom who listen to the podcast. So, definitely, want to provide any type of content and distraction to keep people's minds off of, you know the hectic world that we live in and the hectic times. So I hope that we can provide that for you this weekend with this podcast. And we certainly read the chapters to take our minds off of it this week. Now, I just wanted to start off this episode, Tom, with just saying how well written. Like I found a quote on Twitter over the weekend, and it was from Sanderson. It was from an article uh, asking him to introduce the Way of Kings. I guess this was closer to when the book came out,
Mhm.
and in the article, the quote was, "The book started its life many years ago, being about a young man who made a good decision. I wrote the entire book that way before realizing I'd done it wrong. So I started over from scratch and had him take the other fork, the more difficult fork, the fork that cast him into some of the worst imaginable circumstances, ground him against the stone of the world where there is no soil or sand on the ground. My goal was to prove to myself and to him that the good decision was not actually the best one. The Way of Kings is his story, though he shares the space with several others. They'll get their own books later in the series." So I think, it's definitely about Kaladin, and it's definitely Kaladin's story. And what that decision that he mentions exactly is, I'm not 100% sure of, despite really thinking about it the past couple days. But I did just want to take the opportunity to say, how when we first joined and started the on the Reddit page, a lot of posts about Kaladin, but he is such a well written character, especially the way the flashbacks tie in. And I've just been, more and more impressed with, how well written of a character he is. The more we've gone into it, and I just kind of wanted to introduce the pod this week with that because I had found that quote. So just a cool tidbit there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely gets us into the mind of Sanderson, his perspective as he sits down with his his inkwell and his quill. I would imagine that's how he writes all of his books
Yeah.
and and prepares the onset on one of these journeys. But yeah, I mean, this week. I think and I know this is the theme over the history of our podcast to mention this, but uh, probably the strongest set of chapters that we've read in succession so far.
Yeah. Now,
Uh,
people told us that part 3 was kind of when the story really starts picking up steam. And, from the looks of it, they weren't kidding because this back end of part 3 has been one pin dropping after another. And I imagine that'll go into part 4.
yeah, and I think it's pretty crazy. Like I feel like for a while there, like we were kind of like in the same place, getting to know the characters, developing the story, and then now it's just been kind of like you were saying, like bomb after bomb after bomb, each chapter, like building to a like we I think we have a good idea of like what's going to happen, how things are going to play out here. But it's certainly getting wild.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's just start off with chapter 23. Because I feel like this kind of is the stepping point to the final, not the final, but maybe, the rising action for the last, phase of the book here, like the last
Mm-hmm.
kind of journey that Kaladin and Bridgefoot are going to go on. It starts off with Kaladin, waking up and he still is kind of in this depressed state,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better term. And Bright Lord Matal and his wife Brightness Hashal, um, almost immediately kind of worked their way over after Kaladin sees the men kind of waiting for him to lead them into practice. Before he gets the chance to do that, though, the new Bright Lord that's replaced Lamaril and his wife, head over, and basically it seems like I don't know if he's like a mute or if he just decides to not speak, but it seems like he was standing there next to him and he has like armor and a sword on. Definitely looks the part, but the wife seems to be the one. Hashal seems to be the one who calls all the shots. Basically says like, we're gonna, redo how we look at the bridgemen. Make sure that they're, put in their place, and what happened before doesn't happen again because Laravel was, a jackass and let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And puts them on permanent chasm duty. Like each bridge crew is going to have their own permanent duty. And at this point, Kaladin kind of takes a beating from the soldier there, but he kind of just like lets it happen. He doesn't really seem to fight it off too much. Now, the one part of this chapter that really stuck out to me before we go into the chasm was, Syl mentions that she's killed before and that like she's been involved with killing, but she knows that it was right. That it was like I know that it was right. So, I'm thinking, did Spren like maybe help the heralds fight the Voidbringers? Like, were they a part of that? Did they help the Radiants maybe? Um, I don't know. It seems it's very bizarre. Or are they like are Spren maybe even like reincarnations of something, so that like their past lives, like they remember what they did almost. I don't know. A lot more questions about the Spren have come up in these group of chapters for me.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that until our final Kaladin chapter, because I think there was a particularly interesting moment there in that final Kaladin chapter that kind of
Okay.
get, that I think we can push that question further.
All right. Keep that in your back pocket then. Now they go down in the chasm for like obviously the chasm duty, and looking for men to loot and pillage, not pillage, but I guess just grab whatever it is that they send them down for, weapons, armor, things of that nature. And as they're doing that, Kaladin kind of goes off to the side to like work on the bodies by himself, like without the men. And he almost, as the men start kind of arguing about the heralds and whether or not they were real, and that leads into the radiance, and it had some like enlightening conversation on how the people of Rashar view these ancient events, because the radiance and the heralds at this point were thousands and thousands of years ago, which I thought was interesting, especially seeing like Moash and Teft kind of offer their thoughts on it there. Now, at this point, like Kaladin almost snaps, and then that's when we hear this phrase from Teft: "Journey before destination." I just want to spend a moment on this because when we joined the Reddit page, we saw this a lot, and at that point, it was clearly a phrase from the book, but we hadn't read it yet to like really know the context behind it and what it means. Um, and it immediately like it was a well written chapter because it immediately like resonates with Kaladin as he like steps away and like says it in his head. And as soon as I read this chapter, I texted Tom. We're from Philly. We've seen Rocky a million times. We hear it whenever we go to a sporting event. And there's 2 minutes left in the game, and for me, it was just like the Rocky music hit for Kaladin, where like it's the part of the Rocky movie where like he decides he's going to like train and run up the steps and go into the match. So I thought this was a really, really, this kind of got me going. This chapter here, it was a good wake up call for Cal in this moment here, and the journey before destination, like living before you die thing, like. Just kind of seeing how that became, especially with the character Kaladin, it was awesome, and I thought it was a great. It got me pretty riled up. I don't know if you felt the same way when you were reading it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast 2 days ago, 3 days ago when he had David Chang on, and they were talking about, I don't know, randomly they got weirdly philosophical, but David Chang was talking about how in his life now, like he's realized that happiness isn't like the destination. That's like a fleeting moment. It's like all the hard work and the struggle you put into it is actually what happiness is, and that kind of aligns with this journey before destination piece to it. And like it because this is interesting because like they all realize, or like they all know at this point, like Sadeas doesn't care whether they're alive or not. Like he wants them to die. It's the whole point of it. But at this point, because Kaladin has banded them together in through the way he's kind of trained Bridge Crew 4, where he's gotten to a place where all of these people, you know, like regardless of whether they're going to die or not, or he's here to, or they've realized that they've they've kind of realized that this is the best life that they can achieve at this point, is staying alive and being a part of this particular bridge crew. So they
Yeah,
need to
like
do
Sidra said
everything
in
they
the last chapter, like false hope is even better than despair, right?
right, and they like their ceiling and their potential has changed, but for their situation, they're in the best possible situation to survive and to be with each other and to
Yeah, and
continue
that's like
to
the same
grow.
mindset. We could talk about that in a later chapter, but that's like the same mindset that Dalit and the crew he had in Amarin's army felt, right? Like it was a shitty situation to be in, but the fact that they're with Kaladin's team makes it's the you know what I mean? Makes,
Right.
something out of that shitty situation. Um, so yeah, really, and the escape plan, they kind of like after Calvin kind of wakes up here and he says, there is one more thing we could try. And it's like fighting your way out, right? He's saying that we can come down to the chasms, and while we're on chasm duty, we're unsupervised. I can train you guys with the spear. We can hit an outpost, ride out from there, and then, we'll probably be pursued. We might even be caught and killed or, be sent back into slavery. But it's the only thing really left, the only card they really have left to play. Um, so we haven't seen it yet in these chapters, but I'm excited in either the end of here or like in the part 4, like seeing him train the men and like see this plan kind of put into motion. Um, and the gladiator vibes that I mentioned when we first started reading this book continue. I still see. It's almost like Russell Crowe should play Kaladin, but I think he's a little too old and not, you know, if we like went into the future, like he would play old Kaladin in a flash forward, not a flashback.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good choice. I'm trying to think like who's a good young actor to fill that role. Maybe what's his name? Nicholas whatever European last name who played Jamie Lannister.
Oh, I know who
Remember?
you mean. I was yeah, maybe. There's some good fan art that the who was it? Fixer? I think it was Fixer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he put some good fan art of Adeline and Kaladin in that I didn't like. It's weird. I haven't really seen fan art of Kaladin too much, like his face. So that put like I don't know if Nicola, I forget how to pronounce his last name. I don't know. Maybe just because I'm thinking of like Jamie Lannister,
Mm-hmm.
of it. But I definitely can see, like, I've seen some movies where he looks like a little more rough and rugged. I definitely see where you're coming from though.
Yeah.
Now,
Uh, well, so okay, so I have like a thing, and I just want to like this is a quick sidebar.
okay.
So when you when you like watch a movie for the first time or like watch Game of Thrones, a TV show for the first time, and you've read the book in the past, do you think it kind of spoils like part of your imagination and part of like the canon that you've built in your head and how these people are supposed to look?
It's interesting. All right, so let me explain it this way. So I read like the first 3 books of Game of Thrones before I started season 1. So
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't caught up to A Dance with Dragons, but I had read far enough to where I knew season 1 wasn't going to spoil anything for me. So like instantly, like Sean Bean became my canon Ned Stark when I would read the books now, and like they would go through flashbacks. Like his name is escaping me right now, but whoever plays Jon Snow, like he became my canon Jon Snow.
Kit Harrington.
Kit Harington, exactly, exactly. The same for like, oh my god, all of their names are escaping me. But like Theon Greyjoy, Alfie Allen became like my
Mm-hmm.
canon Theon Greyjoy. Now, personally, I picture like Renly. I thought they got the casting wrong a little bit. Robert Baratheon, more or less, I thought he was great, but younger Robert seems a lot different to me. So like with certain characters, I would kind of just keep like when I read, I kind of just keep a different like mental image of the character. But if I
Okay.
really like the casting, then I'll just kind of have them override what my mind has created, if that makes sense.
Okay, okay. I guess you have more compartmentalization skills than I do because I once I see a show or something like anything that I've built in the past has been completely erased.
Now, does
Uh,
that change your opinions on characters, you think? Like when you go back to read and now you have like that the mental image of the character from the show?
I mean, I don't know if it changes my opinion on like their like character,
Yeah.
but I think they're like their mannerisms and like
Yeah.
I but like it's hard to tell because right when you go back and you do experience that again, like I'm always going to be experiencing it through the prism of having seen like the director's portrayal of it. So it's hard to like go back and like even acknowledge or remember what my original opinion of the characters are, and that's why
Oh
like
yeah.
for that's why like it's cool when you get into like a book series like this where like there's no visual medium yet besides like fan art and things like that, and
Yeah.
that's still people's like kind of perception. So it's kind of cool to build a world in your own head. I don't know, just as a quick sidebar, but yeah,
No, yeah, I 100% agree. 100% agree. And
I'm interested to
especially
see because I think HBO Max is going to end up remaking the Harry Potter series as a TV show. Is my guess with Warner Brothers, and they'll
yeah.
definitely use like a new cast or whatever. So I'm curious to see like when we have something so like iconic like the Harry Potter movies and Harry Potter book series, and they introduce like a remake of that, like how my mind is gonna kind of
Yeah, especially
wrestle with that.
that's such a good thought experiment just with like the fantasy genre in general because I feel like the number one thing that you see recasted is like superhero movies. And I feel like because it's happened so much in the past 20 years, I feel like I've become conditioned to like, oh, it's another Spider-Man or like it's another Batman. But like seeing a new Harry Potter that isn't Daniel Radcliffe is going to be fucking weird.
Oh yeah,
Like it's going to be very weird. So it'll be interesting to see how that stuff happens. Also, like the Lord of the Rings series coming out. I know that takes place in a different era, but like if like Elrond or like one of the elves shows up and it's not who played them in the movies, I'm going to be so thrown off. So that'll be definitely something to watch out for. And interesting point that you brought up.
yeah. So where were we? I'm totally
Chapter
lost.
44 now. Now
All right, all right.
this is the flashback, and this is another part. Like when I was like, so we read that point, right? I saw that quote from Sanderson, and then we read this flashback, man. And like, I'm at the point now where, like, a lot of like, even though the first part of the book there wasn't a lot of plot happening, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm so invested in the character of Kaladin now because of Sanderson's writing in the first three parts
Mm-hmm.
that it's going to make his place within the story and the plot like that much better because we're so invested in the character and because he was so well written, before he gets thrust into, whatever circumstances that are going to be coming, in the, next parts and even the next books. So, you know, starts off Kaladin, Tien, and his mother, kind of just like sitting in the rain talking, Lirin comes up, mentions that
Mm-hmm.
Roshone and Bright Lord Amarim are going to be speaking in the town square for, whatever reason. He's called everybody there. So, they go, Roshone gets out. At this point, he has a limp on his leg. He never recovered, which, by the way, the white spine,
Mm-hmm.
Fixer sent us an image of that on the Reddit. And somebody else they said like they marked it at lesser appreciated. They marked it as a spoiler, but like I just looked at it anyway because all it says is that the white spine resembles a velociraptor, but it's the size of a horse and has a saber-toothed tiger tusk. So it's like,
Ouch.
yeah, velociraptor horse saber-toothed tiger hybrid. Definitely makes sense why that they were unable to successfully hunt that, right?
Seems like a unnecessary endeavor.
Yeah, it seems like maybe just hunt something else, man. Like, so yeah, really cool creature there. But yeah, at this point, Roshone gets off, and then Laurel, who, from the first flashback was kind of Kaladin's like crush, was going to marry this guy's son. she gets out and she has the marriage patch on her sleeve, and everybody kind of puts the pieces together that Roshone is now going to marry her to get those, connections. I still don't know who her family is that like it's worth that like this marriage and connections is worth it. I must have missed that, but yeah, man, that's screwed up. And I can understand, Kaladin and Liren are, kind of have the same reaction that I think the readers do when they see that. Um, so I wonder if Laral will come back into the story at any point, or if this was just kind of, you know, Sanderson just kind of explaining the way of the world and the way of Alethi and kind of how like power relationships are made, in terms of like families intermarrying and things like that. But I would be curious if Laral ever makes it back into the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think yeah, because I guess we don't know if Kaladin. I think we do actually know Kaladin has never been back
Nah.
to his
Yeah, he never went
homeland.
home. Yeah.
Um, so maybe we'll see her again, but I think it's doubtful. I think it's more so what you're saying, like this is the way of the land, like kind of
Yeah.
the rich
Now,
and the. Go
you
ahead.
know how in like the Lord of the Rings, so like in the books, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, they go back to the Shire. And like in the movies, it just kind of ends there, right? And they go away and they sail with the elves on the ships. Like Sam stays, gets married. It's, happy go lucky. But in the books, they get back to the Shire and like Saruman is just there for no reason, causing all types of shit. And it's like the scouring of the Shire happens. I was wondering, like, after reading this chapter, I was just thinking to myself, like, at the end of this series, like, more than anything, I just want Kaladin to be able to go home. Like, I would love for him to just be able to go home and, like, see Liren and his mother again. But I wonder if, like, Roshone and Lara would be there and there would be some, some type of conflict if he went back home, like, kind of like scouring of the Shire-esque at the end of Lord of the Rings. But then again, I don't know, who's to say that Kaladin will even be, like, the main character come the third book, but we'll see. Um, Now Amram's introduced at this point, and basically says that he needs men from each village, young men from each village, to fight in these like bullshit border wars that they have. And he takes volunteers at first. I guess there's not enough volunteers, so Rashone, being the piece of shit that he is, has a list ready, and of course Tien is on
Oh
the
yeah.
list. Um, and we've been kind of trying to piece together. We know that Tien has died and that Kaladin has felt like he failed him, but we've been trying to guess in what way that happened. I would have never guessed that Tien was in the army as well, just based off the description of him, right? Like I would have never guessed that this is what would have happened.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's part of the like the the fucked upness of this decision here. I think everybody
Yeah,
knew like Tien's personality, like that he would faint at the Saint of Blood. This was very reminiscent of a Hunger Games beginning here, where
yeah,
our man Kaladin ends up volunteering his tribute. Though that didn't exactly work the same because he didn't replace Tien, but yeah, so they end up losing. The parents end up losing both their children to the military, and Roshone kind of gets his way. The fuckhead.
yeah. I know, and the scene almost like how in Braveheart, remember in Braveheart when like the Lord came down and like he wanted to exercise the right of first night, where like he takes like the guy's wife,
Mm-hmm.
like and like the people's like he just is kind of like in front of a crowd when he announces that, and like the crowd's reaction to it. Not that like it's totally different scenarios, but just like the dynamic of like a lord, like coming down to like this like village and kind of making this like insane claim like he has any right to make. Seemed like I don't know, an interesting comparison there, or at least visually when I was picturing it, kind of like the same type of dynamic there. But at that point, Kaladin obviously volunteers, and he promises his parents that he'll bring them back. And as you look at Kaladin now and how when he says that he's failed people, I think not only Kaladin, when you're in his POV, has mentioned numerous times like I failed Tien, I failed Dalit, I failed Ken, I failed bridge some of the members of Bridge 4. But he's never actually said that he failed his parents. But you can definitely tell that, like, but by the fact that he promised them that he would bring Tien home and that he wasn't able to do that, that there's definitely probably like subconsciously in his character, like, feels like he failed them as well. And that's probably part of the reason why he's never going back home, right?
Certainly, certainly. I mean, I think that's like the whole reason he says like, oh, he's going to enroll again. Later, he's like in the final flashback chapter,
Yeah, he would have
that
enrolled again if anything hadn't happened.
if anything had happened because he like didn't want to face his parents and like he had written to them to tell them about Tien and he had never heard back and basically like he had accepted this failure, which is kind of interesting because like he did everything in his power like across all these people I think to save these people and to protect them. um like I think we need to give our Kaladin guy like a little bit of a come on man, like it's not all your
Yeah,
fault, you
yeah,
know.
absolutely. And I wonder if maybe like just because being a surgeon, like it's either you save the person's life or you don't. That like maybe he doesn't see the gray area. You know what I mean?
Right, but
Um,
even with his dad was like, look, you can't save them all, blah blah blah. I guess he's always kind of
yeah,
had that personality where he's been disappointed by not being able
yeah,
to save someone.
yeah. I guess that was like the one lesson of Lyran's that like never really stuck with him. He's still stubborn about having to save everybody, right?
Right.
So yeah, certainly an interesting dynamic there. We'll dive back more into him later with the Syl thought after we talk about Shallan a little bit here, because this was this chapter 45, man, was awesome. Like I was I was saying shit last week about how I wasn't the biggest Shallan fan.
Yeah.
Um and I'm doing a 180 this week. I'm back in.
Wow, he's
I'm back
back.
in on Shallan. Especially
Uh,
because the end of chapter 48, like so I have some concerns. Some concerns were raised. Um but I'll get to that. So Shallan is diving into Gavilar's interest in the Parshendi.
mhm.
He seemed to be interested in them well before he knew about the gemstones. So that makes me think, Dalinar was having dreams in part two when we were reading his chapters. Maybe Gavilar was having these dreams about the Shattered Plains and the Parshendi before he ever knew like anything about them. So that's why he had such interest in them. That's my first guess, at least, that Gavilar was also reached out to by like these dreams, or I guess the better word would be visions, right?
Right. I think it's like maybe I don't know. We don't know yet, but maybe Dalinar's also survived a high storm, and this is just like a long term effect of surviving
Oh,
that type of
yeah,
experience. You
yeah.
start having these visions.
If you
That was
survive the
kind of
high storm, like the high storm will speak to you, maybe.
that was kind of like my read on it. Like if you're like the type of person, not type of person, basically yes. If you have like the will to survive a high storm, or you're like an elevated power, like we think Kaladin might be, that once you do that, that the heralds or the Almighty or whatever it is, start to reach out to you through these
See,
visions.
that's an interesting point because not to jump too far ahead, but there is a Kaladin chapter coming up where he has a vision in the beginning of it, and in the vision it says men don't ride the storms anymore. So I wonder if by surviving the like to your point, like if you survive the high storm, like maybe that's like the heralds or whatever it is, you riding the storm, you can now be touched by visions. It's definitely an interesting thought, for sure. Now, also your theory,
Mm-hmm.
there was an epigraph that I thought confirmed. For some reason, I had thought confirmed it was real, or I wrote down in the outline that I confirmed it was real. It was a. Oh, give me a second here. It was an epigraph. Let me pull it up here from the Reddit page. Though I was due for dinner in Vedan City that night, I insisted upon visiting Kolinar to speak with Tivbet. The tariffs through Eurytheri were growing quite unreasonable. By then the so-called Radiants had already begun to show their true nature. Following the firing of the original Palladium, only one page of Turksum's autobiography remained, and this is the only line of any use to me. So it's somebody's autobiography who uses like tariffs and Kolinar and Eurytheri all in the same sentence, which to me proves that I don't understand how, every scholar in the freaking world like Yasna hasn't seen this and just said, well, it's obviously, real in that case. But, I digress. However, your theory going to be coming up at some point in the story, right? I would be shocked if there's not a chapter where we find this lost city eventually. Maybe not in the Way of Kings, but in one of the 3 books of the series so far, I would guess.
Yeah, and then again, like we kind of get into this last week. Like, is it truly a lost city, or is it just out of the purview of the Alethi? Because
Yeah,
like
or is it even a city that they don't real like? It could be an existing city that they don't. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense at all. But like an
right, right,
existing
right, right.
city that has a different name now, or they don't know that it's your theory, perhaps.
Yeah, like what's his name? Shazin or Shirin, I forget. When he's talking to Kaladin in the later chapter, kind of explaining like the city that he originates from and the culture and like all this and like all these different things, and then Kaladin's completely unaware. I feel like there's a lot of like to certain cultures and to certain beings, you're not all knowing of what's out there civilization
Oh
wise at
yeah,
this point.
yeah, and
So I think maybe
especially
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, when like Dalinor and Kaladin, or I'm sorry, Dalinor and Adolin, like because they're like bright lords and like come from like a Lethi royalty, kind of more so to speak, they might know about it. But anybody other than them, like Kaladin, who like comes from like a regular village, like you're right, like they don't know about what's outside, Yakoved or Lethkar. It seems like those are like the 2 nations that they know like the most about. But other than that, you know what I mean?
Right, right, right.
So
And
yeah,
then
totally
we
agree.
kind of we kind of move forward here a little bit, and we talk about our boy Cabsel drops in.
Yeah, so Cabsel, you know, ambushes her almost in the library. And they have a conversation here, and she asks him questions about the Voidbringers, and he mentions how like the Ardents, don't like to talk about the Voidbringers because the Ardents are, more or less related in a roundabout way to the Radiants, and it's their failure that this happened. Um, so like some definitely like a little bit of guilt there on the side of the Ardents, you can see that they don't really face. It seems like they kind of just sweep it under the rug and talk about other
Yeah.
things. Is kind of the vibe I got. Now, Cabsel says, why, his read on everything with Yasna and the Voidbringers is that she wants to prove the Voidbringers false to prove that Vorinism is false. Now, Yasna's explanation earlier in the chapter when she spoke of it seemed to the opposite to that, and like later on it is, she even says that that's not true. um I think she wants to find proof in it, to find, you know what I mean, she mentioned earlier in the chapter that she wants to find that like everything in history is kind of given the best, it's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's kind of warped to be, like tell the best possible story with maybe not all of the truth or all of the facts, and that's really all that Yasna is concerned about. Like she just wants to find the truth in the Voidbringers. You know what I mean, rather than prove them false.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
so Cavsel definitely has like the wrong read there. Um, at least from what I can tell of Yasna. Now, I did just want to touch on, for our redditors out there, you give us a lot of great comments every week and enlightening comments. One thing that I'm curious about this week is the Silver Kingdoms. What era is the Silver Kingdoms? Because we've heard it mentioned a few times here now. Is that like right after the Heralds left and the Radiance had kind of taken over the mantle? Is that like after the Radiance fell? And are any of the Silver Kingdoms still around? Because like Kolinar was mentioned in that epigraph where Eurytheri was mentioned. So like Kolinar, is more or less an ancient territory itself. So like is a Lethkar, or was a Lethkar a silver kingdom that became kind of its own kingdom later? I wish there was like a like a timeline, right? Like a historical timeline of like when, like how we got to where we are now. But maybe we can piece that together as we continue to read the series. Now, what happened here next? Okay. So she decides to draw. Okay, so this is where shit really hit the fan, and
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
became like reading really fast because I didn't want to put it down, and I just wanted to find out what happened. So I had to go back and actually reread this one after like I sped read through it. She draws Capsule, and she's like getting emotional about it. Um, she decides in her head that she's going to send the Soulcaster away to her family so that she can stay and study, but that she really doesn't give a shit about Capsule. She just wants to stay and study,
Hmm.
and that's like really the thing that's drawing her, um, to like not go back to her family. Now at
Hmm.
this point, she gets lost in her train of thought and draws these demons with like the obscene shaped heads again, and really incredibly written scenes here by Sanderson as she continues
Hmm.
to run away, turn around, draw what's in front of her, and the demons are there getting closer and closer and closer. Right. So she runs to her room, and this is where shit really gets weird.
Hmm.
There's a scene here where she starts mentioning she does the 10 heartbeats thing where you summon the shard blade that Dalinor does. And I don't know if I missed this earlier. When did she ever mention that she has had a shard blade? Because she says no, I promised myself that I wouldn't use that. But then before she even gets to, like 9 or 8 heartbeats, she gets cut off by the voice, "What are you?" So I just want to pause and talk about, does she have a shard blade?
Okay, so it definitely hasn't been mentioned before in the past.
Yeah.
So she may have one. Uh, but I think at this point, if she does, we're not aware and we haven't been exposed to it.
Yeah, like she's done a good job of shielding it, or maybe I don't know. And how would she have gotten one? Does it pass down? You think from like let's say her father and her family had one, like her house. Is she like the next in line to receive it? You think?
Perhaps, or
Is that
she
how?
like because she was leaving, or like it was a secret agreement between her and her father because she was leaving to go and fulfill this. They gave her
Yeah,
the shard blade.
yeah. Because
There's kind of
she would
a
know.
number
I
of
think if she
options.
killed a Shardbearer, right? Like she would, like, and even how would she? She doesn't seem like the violent type. You know what I mean?
Right, right, right.
So some unanswered questions there. Now this voice that said, "What are you?" This demon. She reaches out and she feels something, and when she feels it, she kind of gets lost in this like dream or more or less like a vision, I guess. Some quotes from the vision. I've this voice. I've been as I am for a great long time. I
Hmm.
will change. What that could possibly mean, I have no idea. I wonder. Like my first thought is, was she talking to a Voidbringer? Was
Hmm.
she talking to like something that happened 4,500 years ago in the prelude, right? Like I wonder if that's what a great long time is, and now that it's time to change, maybe. Is it Odium who we caught the glimpse of in a Kaladin chapter coming up?
Hmm.
Um, I have no idea, man. I was a little lost here, but it was like I have so many questions, and I just want to keep reading. Like I'm at the point now where I want to keep reading Shallan chapters to find out what the hell is going on.
Yeah, I think it's some sort of ancient power, whether it's the
Yeah.
Voidbringers or the Heralds, or she's in communications with either some ancient being, some ancient power. Like
Yeah, and it's
who
like,
knows? But we're kind of at a loss.
and I think there's something about Shallan and her past that we don't know about yet because that's the second time that they've said, "What are you?" And they're clearly, they're clearly enamored with her for some reason. But the first time happened before she ever even had the Soulcaster, right? So I don't
Hmm.
understand. Something about Shallan is more than meets the eye, I would say. Or maybe Shallan's family. Maybe her family has, like, maybe her ancestry, perhaps. I don't know. That's like a common theme in the fantasy genre, ancestry. So that's where my head goes, maybe. Will certainly be interesting to see how that goes. Now, at the end of
Yeah.
this vision, it says, "Give me what you have now." Now, when I first read that, I thought that the Soulcaster was going to, like, disappear, but
Hmm.
that didn't happen. But she does snap out of it and finds out that she soul casted wine in a goblet into blood, and she knocks the goblet over. The blood gets everywhere,
Hmm.
and she didn't even have the soul caster on. So whatever happened in this vision, she did it seems like she doesn't know how she did it, right? She didn't even have it on. It just kind of happened. Um, Now at this point, Yasna is knocking on the door, and quick thinking, she cuts her arm and kind of passes out. Um, which we can discuss that in the final chapter, which I have a lot of thoughts on that final chapter. Any closing thoughts on this chapter before we move on to Kaladin?
So I don't think she used the Soulcaster. I think it was like we've seen with Seth and the Shins, where they're able to kind of use Stormlight and to use power within to conjure things and
Yeah,
to change the environment around her. I think that either she is special and has access to this power and has never realized it, or everyone has access to this power and only because she was in a situation of desperation that she figured out how to kind of use it, and now she might have like be learning how to get control over it.
yeah,
But I don't. I just the way it was written and I to me like I think that she still believes she used the Soulcaster and that it was one of the 10 essential
elements.
elements. But I really, really am led to believe that there's more going on here than the eye
Yeah,
meets.
absolutely. And remember when she first drew King Taravangian and Yasna was in the room?
Mhm.
And the demons showed up. Now, when I first read that, I thought, okay, these demons are either with the king or they're with Yasna, and that's her drawing ability. When she gets lost in the trance, she can just see, like, feel the spirits that are there. I didn't guess the first time that they were with her because, like, what you know, Shallan at this point is a pretty, she's trying to save her family, but there's nothing like supernatural about her, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It'll certainly be something to pay attention to, and especially like with Dalinar's visions and this Kaladin vision coming up, how they're all related because I imagine they are, and who this voice was that she heard, and why are they changing? What are they changing to? And then they give me what you have now. What does she have that they want?
I don't
Could be
know. I
anything.
don't
I think
know.
it's what I mean. I think there's a lot more to Shallan that meets the eye, and a lot more to Shallan that we don't know.
I agree. I agree. I think we're kind of lost.
Yeah. And I feel like Sanderson is the type of guy who's going to make Shallan not be a POV in part four now, just to make me feel like a jackass for talking shit. Now I want her to be a POV. So that's karma for you. But we'll see. We'll see when we get to chapter four. Now, another dream sequence coming up in chapter 46, and I love, like, I don't know, the fantasy genre does a great job of like incorporating these dream sequences. Like, it happened in Game of Thrones all the time. There's one with like Jaime Lannister where he has a dream sequence where he sees like every member of his family, and even like Brienne, and I don't know, they do just a really good job of like symbolism, and it's an interesting storytelling device that books can use that TV shows and movies don't really take advantage of. Um, Now he's it says that he's the storm in this, and this is what I was getting at when you were saying earlier about the high storm. There's a voice that says the men don't ride the storms, and men ride the storms no longer. Um, but he kind of like is going all across Rashar and seeing all types of different landscapes and cities and villages and peoples. He mentions when he's in the Shattered Plains that there's a large plateau at the center and that there were lights. I wonder if that's a Parshendi city.
Mm-hmm.
They've mentioned that they must have some type of civilization that they retreat to, after they hunt the chasm fiends. And he also sees Seth in these visions. Um,
Yes.
what do you think about that? Is that I imagine eventually, like at one point, Kaladin and Seth's paths will cross. I don't know if it's going to be as adversaries or if they're going to be on the same side. You know what I mean? Because Seth is such a wild card and how he operates, with his with not his gemstone, but the thing that controls him, the
The Oath
stone that
Stone.
controls him. Yes, those stone.
Yeah. I well for first I think this is like this whole dream sequence is Kaladin like living through a high storm as the high storm, and that's why he's moving so quickly and seeing everything across the land.
Yeah,
That was my take on that. I don't know
Like he's what
kind of
he's
agree with
seeing,
that.
like he's actually seeing shit. Like he's actually seeing real things
Right, right. Like I
because
think
like
he's
through the eyes of the high storm, so to speak.
yeah, right. Like what I kind of hit on earlier. I think he's either
Oh, that's
being blessed
interesting.
by
Yeah, I
the
like that.
Almighty with like an elevated power, or like the high storm itself has surviving it gives you an elevated power. But I think he's an elevated being at this point, beyond like a normal Alethi. And then the other thing you were kind of getting on with Seth, I could see like if I had to like draw the line of events, I could see Seth being assigned to kill Dalinar or Adolin, and and Kaladin just being in the right place at the right time after seeing um, Adolin kind of protect the sex
Oh,
worker,
yeah.
and then that's kind of how our storylines converge. But that's just a total shot in the dark.
Yeah, and it would be interesting too because of Dalinor and Adeline obviously know it was a Shin in all white, the assassin in white. His description has kind of gotten out there, so they would definitely recognize, that that's the guy that killed his brother. So that would be crazy. We'll definitely see as that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the voice also says, the men ride the storms no longer. The oath pact was shattered. That goes back to the prelude when when the 10 heralds or the 9 heralds put their swords in the ground. And the
Mm-hmm.
10th herald was obviously in desolation. Also calls him a child of honor. I don't know if that's herald or radiant related. Thought maybe it could be. Also, odium comes most dangerous of the 16. That's the first I've heard of the 16. I wonder, like, are there 16 different um, riders of like the desolation, so to speak, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and he's like the head honcho, maybe. We'll see. Kind of like, or maybe like for 10 heralds, there's 16 like Voidbringer lords, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
So yeah, more or less that. So this Odium guy, maybe the main villain.
Yeah, I think based on this vision, and especially the fan art, kind of definitely put it deeply into my head. And then the um, what's Sill's reaction to
The
the
name.
name later in the chapter, and I think like kind of circling back to that I'm more on the perception that she has no memory because she's lived so many lifetimes, like similar to the heralds or whomever we were following in the prologue. Like every time they die, they return, and she's just like because she's living longer than like a normal spren, she's becoming more and more sentient about her past, and I think part of that might have been fighting along someone against Odium in the past, and that's why she reacted in such
Oh
a way.
yeah, or like maybe like how she follows Cal, and like maybe there was like another herald or like a radiant that she like hung out with before. That like she's always had like this human interaction, maybe.
Right, right. That was kind
Interesting.
of my read on the situation.
I like that. I like that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and I actually went back and read the prelude. No mention of Odium. No mention
Okay.
of the 16. Um, so there was one beast in the prelude there. Let me pull it up here, just because I thought it was interesting. Um, you got things like surge binders. Don't know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also Thunderclast. Thunderclast. It's not Thunderclast is what like that stone thing was that they were killing. I don't know if that was actually a Voidbringer that was described back then. It's interesting to go back and just to read it just to see how it fits in now. I was going to go back and read the prologue for next week too when we finish part 3 just to see if there's anything about like the Shin and the Parshendi and Parshman kind of relation that I might have missed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, now Caldor is like the Kaladin now, like Dalinar, is having these visions. You're like, why them? Who is the face that he continues to see in the sky? I think we kind of have checked that box off with like that maybe the high storm relation. Unsure if Dalinar has been a part of that, but the Way of Kings might also be what awakened him, whereas the high storm might be what awakened Kaladin, but it might be like the same type of awakening still. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Now, when he wakes up, Bridge Four is kind of like restraining him, kind of like the same way that the Eleanor was restrained
Yeah.
by his men when he had the visions. Now, another sphere ran out in the corner. Is Kaladin just sucking up all this, like without even touching them? Is he just like sucking up all these spheres' energy? Like, I don't.
Yeah. I think he's just similar to Shallan. I think that like, and I don't know if they're special or if it's like a higher realization thing. I think they're beginning to be able to use the power of Stormlight without having to like process it through like a shard blade or a shard plate.
Yeah, like they're
I
kind of,
think.
yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Now, at this point, everybody shaves. Kaladin becomes clean shaven. So, he feels like a new man, always a fresh feeling. Sigil, we find out, is a Rock tells us that Sigil is a world singer, and his people they kind of like travel around from each kingdom, and then they bring back knowledge to their kingdom of other parts of the world, and that's kind of what Sigil is. Now, still unsure how the hell he became a slave and a bridgeman, but I guess with all the men of Bridge Four, Moash, even they all have interesting Teft. We don't know what the hell Teft's background is. Um, I think Rock is really the only one that like explained it in detail how he ended up where he is. So
Right.
I thought that was interesting about the crew there.
Yeah.
Now we get a Parshman Bridgeman here. Gaz continues to give them kind of the runt of the litter, so to speak. Now they decide to just call him Shen because, simple name. Now here's one thing that I'm a little confused about. And I don't think I'm confused, just I think it's like intentionally we don't know a lot about the Parshman, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. But it seems like he could answer questions and like if he wanted to, maybe he could talk. But they're such like shy and like docile to begin with. That like I wonder like are Parshmen like are they actual just like normal people or like are they and they've just been so beaten down by society and like being like servants that they're just kind of the way they are? Or are they is there something actually like is there something related to like the heralds and the radiance that has actually like taken like the soul out of these people? You know what I mean?
No, I think it's I think it's the people that have been beaten down. Like I think it's like a classism thing. Like the Alethi have always used the Parshendi, and the Parshmen is kind of like their servants, and that in general the species is like taught generation over generation
Yeah.
to be deferential, and that's kind of why.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was like because when they were first described, like I wasn't aware that they could even talk. Like like I thought that it was just like an empty shell of like a human that just kind of did what was told. So I thought maybe like their souls were robbed of them. Like my head went in a lot of different scenarios there. But yes, meeting like this is like the first Parchment that we've actually like met.
Right.
Um, so looking forward to learning more about that type of those types of characters and more about the Parchment in general, hopefully. Now, this is when things get a little weird with the Spren here. Kaladin asks some questions to Syl about, do you believe in the Almighty or is the Almighty real? And she says, perhaps I should know this one. I think, maybe like she, which, maybe when, especially to your point about her living so many lifetimes, like she's trying to think so far back
Mm-hmm.
to maybe like a forgotten era of Rashar, but she can't remember because it's she's lived so many lifetimes or she's seen so many things, and she's only really become sentient recently, maybe. Um, so I don't know. That whole conversation was interesting, and then her reaction to Odium, obviously, like was bizarre, like almost like like how when people say Voldemort in Harry Potter, you know what I mean, like.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that was interesting. That was interesting for sure. At this point, at the end of the chapter, Adeline is seen. He saves a sex worker, um, and there's a dynamic here. Adeline saves the sex worker, and he mentioned that his father would kill him if he were to, take her services. Does that mean that Daelanor is still there and hasn't stepped down? Now, the flip side to that is it also calls him, he refers to himself as Bright Lord, or the book refers to him as a Bright Lord. And can you be a Bright Lord if your father is in command, or was he already a Bright Lord beforehand? Like, I was looking for clues in this passage to see if Daelanor stepped down or not, and if Adolin was in charge.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that a Bright Lord is like a rank thing, and that even though his Dalinar, I think Dalinar has stepped down, and I don't know actually. I'm a little bit torn. I think you can be a
Yeah.
Bright Lord without being like Dalinar status, and then beyond that, I'm not sure whether Dalinar has stepped down and what this means. But he
Yeah, I
is
was hoping maybe we
the
could find
represent.
out.
He is like a representative going directly to Sidaeus' camp to like discuss something. So maybe he has replaced Dalinar, but we're not sure.
We're not sure, yeah. And it says he asked him to give word to Bright Lord Reril McCorum, and
Mm-hmm.
that name doesn't ring a bell to me. I don't know if we've spoken to him before, but what I was thinking was, is he kind of continuing his father's work of trying to unite the different war camps for like a joint plateau assault? It would be interesting to see if he was still like kind of pursuing that. Um, which would be cool. Like if Dalinar did step down and it was Adolin, to see Adolin kind of still pursue those things. Um,
Right.
but we'll probably find that out. Find that out in part four. Now,
Mm-hmm.
two more chapters left. Is this the chapter that you wanted to mention with Syl, or was that kind of what you got at before with Syl with Kaladin?
That the one that I got at before was
Okay,
Syl,
cool,
but
cool.
I do agree with your take here, and we can kind of get into it.
Yeah. Now, chapter 47 is the POV. And now this chapter one, I thought was incredibly written and like a great description of the battle. And the fight scenes, I think, especially just because with shard blades and shard armor, like the fight scenes are just, dope as hell. So chapter 47, it's chapter one, but through Kaladin's point of view. And there was a point where a translucent white light, plays a trick on him. It's definitely Syl. He just didn't realize that it was Syl back then. And I was thinking, do you think that Syl was with them in the flashbacks at all? I don't remember any type of I don't remember in the flashbacks any reason to believe that Syl was with them then. But it seems like as early as a year ago, Syl was with him.
Right.
Um, so that at least we can piece together. Now we see what happens when Kaladin goes after the Bright Lord, who he kills, and then he turns back and sees the Shardbearer run over Ken and Dalit and kind of his other men, and he finds them there. And then he kind of gets up and storms after the Shardbearer, who's now about to kill Bright Lord Amaram.
Mm-hmm.
You know, great little duel here. And then eventually, like after a couple tries, he gets the spearhead through the slit of his helmet and killing him that way. And, at this point, we've heard a few times in various chapters now, like if you kill a shard bearer, you get the shard blade.
Right.
And he kind of just, he doesn't even want it because he just saw this blade kill all of his friends and his men. And, there's only a couple of, his men left.
Mm-hmm.
And, this, the whole, it kind of, the whole thing turns him off. He doesn't want anything to do with it. And he says that his men can have it. And, he walks away from Amaram at that point. And do you think like is that reason to enslave him though? Like is that reason to send him into a slave camp, or was there another decision he must have made? You think?
So yeah, I mean, I guess like it's an understanding that if you defeat a shard bearer, that you get their shard equipment. But it seems like if they wanted to reject that claim, they could. But maybe it's so disrespectful to reject that claim. Like maybe like religiously, like if you're meant to kill a shard bearer, like you've killed a shard bearer, you have to like fulfill the prophecy. It might be something like that. But so I am
Let's
I
like
am
yeah,
leaning towards it being it being related to him rejecting the claim.
yeah. I wonder. I wonder if we'll get one more flashback that like shows him getting put in captivity, or if that was like the end of the flashbacks. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I'm curious though. Is this did it just kind of break him at because there was a point when he was talking to Rock and Teft, right? And he mentioned that he killed somebody important, but he was thanked for doing it. And like I'm trying to think, he killed the Shardbearer, he saved Amarim's life. Maybe Amarim did thank him for doing that, but like he still put him into slavery. Like what the fuck, Amarim? Um, you know what I mean? So I'm just trying to piece things together, but I'm sure we'll find out more information soon.
Yeah.
Um,
I think Amarin's a good guy, so maybe like Amarin dies from his fractures, and then whoever his replacement is the one who can
Oh
maybe.
yeah, right, right. Maybe good point. Good point. We'll see what happens. I'm not sure if Amram was mentioned at all in any of Dalinor's chapters when he was like thinking back of like how like the home front is doing.
Hmm.
But I don't think we've heard of him at all other than Kaladin. So perhaps we'll definitely keep an eye out for that.
Hmm.
Now, chapter 48 is an interesting chapter, and I kind of was trying to play like detective with it a little bit. Just let's do a quick summary first. Shallan, she starts the chapter off saying like she meant to make it seem like the picture cutter, but she sees now they're like, oh shit, like this looks like I tried to kill myself,
Hmm.
and now like I'm kind of gonna be, be put through treatment here, obviously, be taken
Hmm.
care of as if I was, a patient who was at risk.
Hmm.
Um, she mentions that the demons are still there, just chilling in the room, and that she's like becoming okay with it. It's cool.
One
Um,
with the demon.
Yeah, be one with the demons. Definitely don't be freaking out, just like transforming wine into blood every time you see them. That would not be productive. So glad that she's coming to terms with it. Now there's a quote here, right, where she's kind of speaking to herself about what happened, and she says she'd taken the light from the sphere and given it to the goblet as a bribe to the spren that transform.
Hmm.
And she's like, "Is that how soul casting works?" And it's also like, why? Like, is the Stormlight the bribe for the Spren? Like, and what's the relationship? Like, what does Stormlight do for Spren?
I don't
I
know.
think
Yeah, I don't know.
so. Hear me out though. I think when we went to Shinavard, right, the place that actually has like grass and plants and strawberries and horses, there's no Spren there.
Okay.
So the high storms are blocked there. So it seems like the Spren only exist in parts of the world where the high storms come, right? So there's the Stormlight relation. Does the Stormlight create the Spren in some way? Um,
Maybe it powers them. Maybe it keeps them alive. It's like their
Maybe it
life
keeps them
force.
alive, right? It's kind of and Kaladin mentioned a couple times during a high storm, she kind of will go and like fly around in it, and maybe that's whose point of view he's seeing the visions from. So, like she's just flying around Rashar, and he's watching through her eyes as she like charges up with Stormlight. I don't know. Seems like the high storm Spren relation is definitely a thing, though.
Hmm.
Definitely a thing.
I would
Now,
agree. I would agree.
now here's where kind of we have to start playing detective, right? The king visits, and he mentions, this hospital is like one of my pride and joys. I would be more happy if I didn't have to use it as much, but it's a you know one of the highlights of Carbranth. She asks for visitors, so the king walks out. Yasna's outside. She seems like she's been out there for a while, right? She's obviously concerned about Shallan, despite being a hard ass. Clearly has a
Yeah.
soft heart. She cares. Um, Comes in
As as they all do. Yeah.
as they all do, as they all do. Comes in, speaks with her for a little bit. She even gives her, she apologizes for like working her too hard. She gives her a blank book, the Book of Endless Pages, and she reveals that she was almost converted to a devotee before because this one devotee like bought into the idea of like searching for answers and searching
Hmm.
for answering questions. And that's why like it's like the Endless Pages book I guess is more like uh what's the word I'm looking for? Like a figure of speech almost like there's no ending, right? There's always going to be more questions, there's always going to be answers to pursue, and I guess that really spoke to her. So interesting side of Yasna the heretic that we see there. Now at this
Right.
point Kabzal comes in and he brings in, as always, the jam and the bread. Now Yasna puts her finger in the jam and smells it, and she does not seem repulsed. She seems like it. She seems like it smells normal. She gives the jam to Shallan after that, or she puts the jam down. Shallan picks the jam up, smells it, smells like vinegar and something else that isn't good. Repulsed by it.
Mm.
Tabsel thinks the same way, but then he eats it. And then he tries to force Shallan to eat it to make it seem like, I don't know. Shallan described it in the chapter like he was acting bizarre. That like that at that point that Tabsel was acting a little bit strange, and that he kind of like wanted her, like he wanted her to eat it. At this point, he gets up and tries to run out of the room and just collapses. Shallan does the same thing, and now Yasna goes to save Shallan. She tells Shallan she's going to have to soul cast her blood to purify it. Obviously, Shallan has her soul caster, so she's like, you can't. So she opens her pouch, and I think what happens is the soul caster comes out of the pouch. Yasna gasps. Yasna gasps distantly, and then I think she soul cast her blood. Whether or not she used Yasna's soul caster that she replaced, or the one that Shallan had stolen and had just taken out of the bag, I'm not sure. My first question though is who poisoned the jam?
I think it was the Ardents. I think they caught wind that they realized that she turned this wine to blood, and they're kind of scared of her power and what she's finding
Without Cabsel knowing.
without Kabsel knowing.
Without Cabsel knowing. Now my only question is,
Yeah.
Yasna put her finger in the jam and it didn't smell bad.
Mm. So you think
Right?
Yasna is maybe poisoning?
Listen, I don't know if Yasna poisoned the jam, but it's fishy. It's very fishy. Do you think that the jam got soul casted by the demons?
No, I don't think so. Wasn't my read on it. I think it was someone intentionally poisoned it, and whether Yasna was involved because she realized that her soulcaster was stolen, or we'll see.
Kabzel looked surprised as Yasna removed the lid and dipped a finger into the jar. She hesitated, then raised a bit of the jam to her nose to sniff at it. She was just simply curious about the scent. I heard that strawberries are very distinctive. Like, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, like, she puts the lid back on, puts it down, and then when Shallan picks it up, all of a sudden it smells like vinegar and death. You know,
Yeah.
so that's why I thought, like, did it get soul casted maybe at
No,
some point?
that's actually a good point. So that's definitely possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm very curious about what happened, and I'm also very curious now that Yasna knows, assuming that the Soulcaster fell out of the pouch. Now that Yasna knows that, like, what the hell is going to happen now? I don't know. If Shallan is in the POV in part 4, I'm going to have so many unanswered questions.
Well, yeah. Let's see. Should I peek ahead?
Should we?
Yeah. Let's peek ahead. Whatever.
What's the harm in knowing who the POV is? You know.
Yeah. So 4 is Dalinar, Kaladin, Adolin, and Navani.
Oh wow! So they are going to do that to us.
They are.
Jeez.
They are.
Okay. Well, we get Dalinar back, so maybe that'll scratch a different itch.
Yeah, and then part 5. I'm going to skip ahead to part 5. Where is it? Here it is. We get Shallan, Dalinar, Kaladin, Seth, and Wit.
Wit. Okay. Respect that.
So yeah, all right. So what's next on the horizon here?
So we're going to finish part 3.
Okay.
Now it doesn't seem like there's any more interludes, so that's interesting. I think this will be a bit of a shorter reading than usual for us. Mm-hmm. Oh no, there are interludes. Okay, cool. So we'll do part 3 and then the interludes, and that'll take us to the beginning of part 4, Next week we'll have a discussion. Kind of, we can do what we did when we finished part two, where we kind of just talk about the story so far. Each character and their arc. We'll go over the epigraphs this far. We already did one epigraph for this week. You want to just do the other three while I got them up
Sure.
here?
Yeah.
So the first one was they lived out in the wilds, always waiting the desolation, or sometimes a foolish child who took no heed of the night's darkness. And keep in mind, this is all Yasner's research on the Voidbringers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a child's tale, but this quote is from Shadows Remembered, seem to hint at the truth I seek. Seem to hint at the truth I seek. I wonder if like a foolish child who took no heed of the night's darkness, is that like symbolism for like, like as the Voidbringers, like are they messing with Shallan right now? Like she took no heed of like the power of the Soulcaster, and now like they're kind of talking to her. I don't know. That's a very roundabout way, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
stretch. However, it's a thought. The next one was Yalignar, called Blightwind, was one that could speak like a man, though often his voice was accompanied by the wails of those he consumed. The Unmade were obviously fabrications of folklore. So this one seems like, that one probably seems like it was, stretched imagination. The
Mm-hmm.
voices being his consumed. We talked about the one with your theory, and then the last one was they take away the light wherever they lurk, skin that is burned. So that one doesn't even really have notes next to it. So whatever the hell that means. Maybe the way the Voidbringers fight, or like the way their henchmen fight, like they're like fire, burned skin, darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or maybe those dark figures that Dalinor was fighting in his flashback, right? Those like dark, like alien looking, like xenomorph looking figures.
Yeah, that was my kind of read on it. I
Yeah,
think
I think
that
that
there
makes a
was
lot
more
more
to
sense
it.
actually. I think that makes a lot more sense actually. Yeah. So those were the epigraphs for this week, and those were the chapters that we read. Man, those chapters kicked ass. I'm excited to dive back into part three here. Um, because of everything that's happening, Tom, I don't know what your schedule is going to look like this week. I would probably have a similar kind. Maybe sometime like we can maybe shoot for like a Thursday, and if we'll see how the reading goes then.
Yeah. Well, how many pages do we have? Because I think I have a little bit more time in my hands now with with everything that's going on. So let's see
With
what we
the
have here.
yeah. So part five starts on 12:05. Or no, I'm sorry. Part four starts on 897. But I don't know if that includes the epigraphs.
It does. It does.
Okay, so it's only like 50 pages.
Yeah. So let's do. Could you mind Wednesday?
Yeah, I can do Wednesday.
All right. Let's do Wednesday.
All right, so we'll double back on Wednesday, finish up part three, and then we can do a longer pod as we start, or a longer reading as we start part four. Um, yeah, as always, for the listeners out there, appreciate you listening. I've started to use the Twitter a little bit more this week. I'm going to try to continue to use it more. Be sure to follow along for updates on when we'll be recording and when the podcast will be out. It's just the easiest. It's the easiest medium to kind of give updates like that. So if you are curious on like where we are in the production and reading process, follow along there. And I've been tweeting out, certain links and things of that nature. Some of the fan art that Fixer has posted, I've stumbled upon searching the hashtag The Way of Kings. Thankfully, I've avoided spoilers, um, so that's very good. But yeah, otherwise, appreciate the comments as always on Reddit. Keep those up. Would be more than happy to have another 14 or 15 of those to read through and respond to. So definitely appreciate those. Tom, do you have any closing thoughts for this week?
I mean, I would say as you guys continue to comment on the Reddit, if there's any types of conversations that you guys are looking for more, if you're kind of liking the direction we're going with things, and then beyond that, no, we're in the kind of the final stretch here.
Yeah, and I did just want to take a one, Mix Mast Micah 55 asked if this was available on Pocket Cast.
Mm-hmm.
I'll certainly look into getting the podcast on other applications that people can listen to. Right now, the person with the painted lines, who my good friend Dave with the painted lines, he's currently going through some medical issues in the hospital. So as soon as I can more so speak to him, We'll get that straightened out. In the meantime, I do ask you keep him in your thoughts and prayers. Um, Everything seems to be going well, but it's never fun being in the hospital. So as soon as possible, I'll try to see those other mediums that we can get the podcast out on. So that way, I know that not everybody uses iTunes and Spotify. So definitely want to get that out there more often. But yeah, in the meantime, we're going to be finishing up part 3, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
We love you.
Potter's
Bye
been
now.
amen.